I'm really, really honored to be on this panel. It's just really thrilling, and it's great to see so many people that I know and love out in the audience. I love it. So I'm going to take a little bit different tact, maybe a little bit philosophical for some of you, and conceptual, but I'm an educator and a writer and a sort of a philosopher, so that's what I like to do. And I was given the task to, I think by Judy, if I got this right, to talk about why there's been kind of a historical disconnect between the peace movement and the environment movement. Okay, did I get that kind of right? Which was a little daunting, as if I could really speak in one voice for either of those, which I can't, but I'm going to try. Okay, so I'm going to try also to just bring education into this, because that's what I know and do. So, so first of all, I think it's really important if we're addressing these issues to talk about what we mean by peace. And the term gets bantered around a lot. So I'm using peace here in its holistic sense, a positive sense. We talk about negative peace and positive peace. Have we heard that? There's a growing genre of peace studies, as many of you know, and this is one of the definitional things people talk about. Negative peace doesn't mean that peace is negative. It means stopping of violence. It's a way of looking at peace conceptually. Positive peace is more, it's peace in its holistic sense. It means living in standards of justice and human rights within a balance of nature, providing meaningful citizen participation within governments and communities. The National Peace Academy uses peace as it is defined in the Earth Charter, which is peace is a wholeness created by right relationships with oneself, with others, other cultures, other life, the earth, and the larger whole of which we are a part. This kind of peace is really inherently dialogic and relationship-based, and it really invites us into conversation with one another, and it recognizes a humanity in each of us, and particularly with those whom we may disagree. This kind of peace really rests on the moral assumption of the inherent dignity of every human being. So really, peace in this context is not separate from the notion of justice. And justice and human dignity are intertwined and rooted in notions of equity. Violence of any sort is an affront to human dignity. And violence does not have to be overt. Violence can be structural, including those conditions that give rise to overt violence, such as lack of access to food, clean water, education. And what about the environment? How does this figure in with peace? Well, I think it's important that we move beyond a narrow definition of environmentalism and embrace some new terminology, which is happening. The term sustainability is one that's quite currently in use. I find that a little problematic at times because we don't know really what kind of sustainability we're talking about. But for some purposes, it's great. I prefer the term that I came across, which some permaculture folks use, which is earth care, people care, fair share. It's a very simple way of looking at it. So this way of defining integrates our understanding of the issues of the environment as they affect people and the earth. Justice and therefore peace are integral to this. And where does education fit in? Well, I think that each of us is an educator. Most education happens outside of formal school settings. Just as all of us are learners, we hope, always, all of us are educators all the time. Maria Montessori has reminded us that education is the primary mover of making peace. All politics can do is keep us out of war. So how can education help us get out of the mess that we're in? Well, if we're all called to be educators, then we're all called to take responsibility in whatever way we can or wherever we find ourselves to first educate ourselves. I think this is really important. And then in dialogue and community, educate others. But I think informing ourselves is task number one, particularly with these tough issues that are facing us. We need to get facts. We need to check sources. We need to seek fuller understanding of these complex issues, which is an enormous challenge. really. We have to learn to live with uncertainty. Martin Luther King quoted the philosopher Alfred North Whitehead, who said, quote, "We live in a day when civilization is shifting its basic outlook, a turning point in which the presuppositions in which society is structured are being profoundly changed." This was in 1967 that King used this term. Now, I think it's quite apt for today. One of my favorite authors is also Gus Speth, and he reminds us in his book that Professor Thorson's talking about, that given the right combination of knowledge, will, and action, we just might make it as a human species through this time of peril. We might actually learn to enjoy some of these new adaptations as we live simpler and more fulfilling lives. We can begin to understand that real national and international security is really linked to human security. We know who's most affected by the effects of global climate change, those who have really, for the most part, not contributed to the problem. The island nations in the Pacific, Bangladesh, the poor in Louisiana, the residents of hospitals in New York City who had to be evacuated during Sandy. We can begin to understand that the increasing societal costs of our continued war on terror, the US government being the fourth largest consumer of fossil fuels in the world, with the military accounting for 80% of our government energy consumption. Reliance on our military presence around the world exacerbates global warming, setting up, of course, this vicious cycle in which we have to defend our oil interests at the same time using enormous energy to maintain our military presence and contributing to greenhouse gases in the process. I'm going to rush along here. I'm almost done. Perfect timing. We understand that we as humans have the capabilities to reverse some of the effects of climate change. Humans are immensely adaptable, creative, and inventive. For one thing, we can come to a new realization of what wealth is. And Bill McKibben in his books talks about the fact that more wealth does not create more happiness. Wealth as happiness means wealth in human relationships and in community. So let's value our tasks as learners and educators by spending time with those whom we love, with our families, with nature, recognizing and celebrating our common humanity. We're going to have to learn to live with risks, and the safest way to do this is within communities. Because we know that the problems that we have created have no solutions within our present framework. So we need a new framework. Vandana Shiva reminds us that the uncertainty of our time is no reason to be certain about hopelessness.